Try to keep still. We'll finish enough already with the haikus. I'll finish off with the one that got me started. Obviously, haiku number one. To freeze the moment in 17 syllables is very difficult.
Hello, my name's Houston, and this is Media Mood Board. Yes, my name's Houston, and this is Media Mood Board, a weekly show about hyper-specific entertainment lists. Welcome to the first episode of 2024. I hope everybody had an incredible holidays. This is our first Christmas in New York, so we did all of the New York Christmassy things. It was very, very fun. I had a great time. And then on New Year's, we just stayed home and I think watched the Gypsy Rose documentary. Normally at the beginning of a year, I'd be looking at kind of year-end book lists to see what I missed or what people had hyped up. But this year, I got books for Christmas. And then Barnes & Noble had a big sale on hardback books. So I indulged in that as well. So today I'm going to do a mini haul of the books that I got over Christmas and from the Barnes & Noble sale and what I'm going to be loosely trying to work through in the first couple of months of this year. We'll start with the things that were gifted to me. These are big boys. These are the books I'm probably most excited to read, but also I'll probably push off a little bit just because they are thicker. But they are the first two books in the Hild sequence by Nicola Griffith. That's Hild and then Mennewood. I may be mispronouncing Mennewood. Maybe it's Mennewood. I'm not sure. As you can see, these are thick. This one's over 600. The other one is over 500 pages. This is a series I've been interested in reading for a while. I was first drawn to it by Hild's cover. I was like, that's really cool. And it looked like kind of a fantasy historical thing. And I was like, okay, medieval, very cool. And then I later saw this cover of Mennewood and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I found out they were part of the same series and said, man, I've got to read this just based on the covers. But then when I started looking into it, it was even more interesting. So these two books are part of a series that's telling the story of this real life figure named Hilda of Whitby, who was this 17th century mystic. As a young girl, people thought she had supernatural powers. So she was like appointed to be like the king's advisors. And she was later went on to be canonized by the church. There's not a whole lot that's known about her life. And so this is like a super meticulously researched, fictionalized version of her life. That's supposed to be extremely immersive in the period is kind of the goal that the author was going for. So Hild is about her as like a young girl and her kind of people seeing her powers and then her ascending into, you know, being king's advisors and stuff like that. So Mennewood picks up where she's 18 years old and Europe is on the brink of war. This is the 17th century was like the Dark Ages, basically. This next one was a gift from my brother. It's A Year of Swollen Appendices by Brian Eno. I'm a really big Brian Eno fan. Here Come the Warm Jets, his stuff with Robert Fripp. And then On Land are some of my favorite albums just period. So in 1995, Brian Eno decided to keep a diary of just what he was doing. And so this is just chronicling that. 95 was when he produced my favorite U2 album, so I'm excited to see that. And he was also messing with a lot of generative music stuff in the 90s, so I'm excited to see if his thought process around that or he's experimenting with it during this year as well. That'll just be a really fun read. It looks thick as well, but inside, because it's like a diary, it's not like packed to the gills, you know what I mean? Also, books about music are really fun because you get to listen to the music alongside as a supplement. Sometimes when you're reading about like a novelist or even someone who's making movies or something like that, you have to say like, okay, if I want to supplement this by seeing the actual thing, you need to really set aside some time. But with music, you're like, oh, they're talking about this album or something. You can listen to 30 seconds of a track and kind of get the vibe of like, oh, okay, interesting. This is what they're going for. So I anticipate a big Brian Eno binge for me this year, even more than normal. So those were all of my book presents. Let's move on to the Barnes & Noble haul. So right after Christmas, Barnes & Noble did a 33% off all hardcovers sale And if you were a rewards member, if you spent at least $50, you then received a $20 gift card. So I spent $50.36 and got a little haul of books. I've been interested in like shorter stories, so some of these are little short dudes, and that also helps because it balances out the thicker stuff that I got from gifts. So first up is Poison for Breakfast by Lemony Snicket. Lemony Snicket, of course, the fictional author of the Series of Unfortunate Events series. I've only read a couple of those, and then I did read all of Lemony Snicket's autobiography. The premise of this book is Lemony Snicket has been poisoned and died, and this is his book investigating his own death. It's just so very, very funny, witty wordplay, dark sense of humor. Meta stuff doesn't always click with me, but he does it in such a cool, funny way. This will be such an exciting and fun read. I can't wait to jump back into his weird little world. Next up is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. End of last year, I saw this Brian Friel play at the Irish Rep and really, really loved it. It was translations, and it just kind of started popping up more and more in my head during the year. And I don't know that much about Irish lit or Irish plays, really. So I got interested in exploring that more. So I've been consuming a lot of Irish media over the past month. One of the early theaters in Ireland was called the Abbey. And so I've kind of been going through a bunch of their playwrights. My preference as far as play stuff is like to see it live, then to hear like a radio drama, and then to read it. Thankfully, there's some cool stuff on Spotify and things like that that were dramatizations of some of that work. So I could just listen to it as if an audiobook. So far, I've listened to the California Artists Radio Theater's audio productions of J.M. Singh's Playboy of the Western World and In the Shadow of the Glen. I've listened to Lady Gregory's The Rising of the Moon and The Workhouse Ward. And I'd also never explored Oscar Wilde before, but he is an Irish. He lived in Britain, but he was an Irish playwright. I'm currently listening through the BBC Radio Drama Collection on that. So I've listened through The Picture of Dorian Gray, Lady Windermere's Fan, and A Woman of No Importance. Out of those, my favorites right now are Picture of Dorian Gray and Playboy of the Western World. I've also been reading some Irish books. I read Arren Arrin by Anne Ehrenreich, and I also read another short story by Claire Keegan. I saw Foster at the library and I picked it up. As I started reading, I was like, this sounds familiar. And it was adapted into a movie called A Quiet Girl last year, which I really liked. So I don't know much about this one, but I really liked Foster, so I'm excited about this one. It's about a coal merchant in an Irish village and the lead up to Christmas, and he finds out something troubling about the church that kind of runs his town. Another short one. So this will be fun. Maybe it's a little late because this is like a Christmassy story, but there's supposed to be a snowstorm this weekend, so maybe it'd actually be perfect. The next little one is Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. This is one I saw as I was leaving Barnes & Noble, and I was like, ooh, what's this? And then I looked in the back and it described it as a cottage gore was the genre name, which perked up my ears. It's this sapphic horror novel about this woman who starts to fall for a handmade soap vendor that she sees at a farmer's market. But then it starts to turn out that the person she's infatuated with might have some dark secrets. Based on that, I can kind of guess what they might be, but I think the journey will be fun. On my books of the year list, I kind of discovered that a lot of them had horror elements to them, even though I don't really seek out horror. So this is my attempt to kind of like start seeking out a little bit more horror. Also, this sounded like something that Rosie would really be into. So if I read it and it's good, I'll pass it on to her and maybe we can talk about it. That'll be fun. And then the final book of the haul is Julia by Sandra Newman. As you can see by the numbers poking up at the top, Julia is a retelling of George Orwell's 1984 from the perspective of the kind of two-dimensional love interest that the main character has in that. And it's supposed to really blow up and build out the world of the 1984 novel. I haven't read 1984 since I was in high school, and I kind of just assume that it's bro-y just because of its kind of fan base or how much it's infected pop lexicon. But I know that George Orwell is an interesting figure. I've been interested in reading like his journalism. But this sounds really world-buildy. It's sci-fi-y, which I like as well. So I'm really interested in seeing what different avenues that the author takes here, and what surprises they have in store. I just think this is such a cool idea for a novel, so I can't wait to jump into it. Well, these are the books that I got in late December that I'm hopefully going to be working through the first few months of the year. I'm sure I will get distracted and some will get pushed off, but I'm really going to make an effort to read through my own library this year. God knows I'll buy things and put them away, which is why I use the library a lot, because I don't feel any guilt about it. Did you get any books for Christmas or took advantage of any of the Christmas sales to get yourself a little haul? If you liked what you saw here, you can follow Media Mood Board on Letterboxd. You can also follow us on Goodreads now, or here on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching. I'll be back next week with another hyper-specific entertainment list. My name is Houston. This is Media Mood Board. Bye.